Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mind Your Nest. I'm your host, Jennifer Rosen, and it's great to be back in studio today, and I have just really a fantastic guest. I've known her, I don't know, maybe for about a year. I was introduced to her by a mutual friend, and she's pretty extraordinary. Her name is Meryl Brandwein, and she's the founder of Brandwein Institute for Nutrition and Wellness. And as we've talked about before, the name of my podcast and my business is called Mind Your Nest. And I've shared with you before the meaning behind Mind Your Nest. Mind your business, mind your matters, take care of yourself. And for the majority of, the start of my business, it's really been correlated primarily to maybe your finances, your family, overcoming challenges, personal or otherwise. But one of the things that I believe to be exceptionally true is taking care of yourself, your health and wellness. And that really is minding your nest, because our bodies are our first nest, I guess. You know, what we put on our body, how we move our body, wanting to have longevity, and wanting to really optimize our life. And I believe, and I've learned, especially from Meryl, there's no better way to optimize your health and wellness by finding out the root cause of some of your ailments and figuring things out. So without further ado, hi, Meryl.
Hi.
How are you?
Good to be here, Jen. I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
That
you
wonderful introduction.
Thank you for being here. So now that I've set the table a little bit, I'd love for you to share your story and how you got to be where you are and why.
And why, right?
Yeah.
The why. So my story, I would say the piece where really we get into the whole root cause. We all have different stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the story of how I started for where I am today goes back about 20 years ago, when I was 6 weeks postpartum after having my third child, and I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had, for people who don't know what that is, it's a type of blood cancer. And I remember when I told obviously it was shocking, because I thought I was healthy my whole life, right? I was in the nutrition field. I was the in the box nutritionist at that time. Very much practiced the conventional didactic practices of nutrition and dietetics, which I never actually resonated with anyway. But maybe that's where the rebel comes out in me. But so 6 weeks postpartum, diagnosed. My friends are all like, "That's not a funny joke." Why? I'm like, I'm not joking, because I was the healthiest person everybody knew.
Can I ask, how did that come about? How did you feel differently and know something was wrong?
So interestingly enough, I remember thinking after I had her, and I was getting up at night to do the feedings, and I was breastfeeding, I was nursing her. And I remember feeling like, why am I like the hot flash or the night sweats, right? You get night sweats after you deliver, right? From all the hormones. But I felt like they were a little bit more, they were just a little more intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, all right, well, maybe because it's my third child. I don't know. Didn't think much of it. And then literally one day I was blow drying my hair. I have a thin neck, so it's not like, and all of a sudden I remember turning my head and I saw a lump on the left side of my shoulder, like clavicle area.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's weird. I don't, literally popped up one day, I felt like. I'm like, where did this even come from? And so that started the whole journey. And my husband at the time came over, like I said to him, "Dan, what is this?" And comes over and he feels it. And he's like, "Oh, it's like probably cancer." Like, he was totally joking. Obviously totally joking. But that's his crazy sense of humor.
Right.
And so that was like the beginning of November. So she was born October 5th. That was in 2000. And the beginning of November, it was actually just before Thanksgiving. It was maybe a couple of weeks into it. We went to a party. He's like, showed the lump to a friend, and he's like, "You got to go get a chest X-ray." And I'm like, that threw me in a tizzy, because I'm in the medical field. Like I know where he was going. Like he took me into the bathroom. We were literally at a holiday party. He took me into the bathroom, felt under my armpits. And I'm like, I know where he's going with this, right? I practiced enough in a hospital. I know I was a pre-med undergrad. Like I knew it. So I started freaking out. And then that following, so that was like a Saturday. It was a Saturday night party. Monday, I was at the doctor's office. And one of the things that I think that a few days before, I was at my gynecologist for a 6-week postpartum checkup, and my blood work was all out of whack. And she said to me, you got to go get this checked. And then I went to the regular doctor, and she sent me right away for a chest x-ray. And when so my husband came with me, and he's in the medical field. He's a podiatrist. So we were in the radiologist's office. I left to go back to the doctor. He like cornered the radiologist and basically said, what's going on? And they said there was a really large tumor in the middle of my chest. Wow. So I had a very large, it was like, you can't see it, like a big potato size tumor in my chest. And I think part of the reason I didn't feel it is I was always in such good shape.
Right.
So when I did the tests for my lung function and cardiac function, the doctors all looked at me like, how are you not short of breath? How are you not? I'm like, I don't feel anything. Right. Like they made me do this step test, and they're like, that's not normal. So anyway, yeah. So it was a whirlwind of a diagnosis, because that was like Monday I was at the doctor's office. Tuesday I was literally at the head and neck surgeon. I think Thursday, because I had to get this taken out on the lump in my clavicle. And they saw that it was encapsulated. So I had that removed. And I think that was like that was the following Monday, and Thanksgiving was Thursday.
Wow. And
then I got into Sloan Kettering pretty much right away. Again, through a friend and a connection. And I remember being in the radiologist's office, like they needed to do the scans, and I was like leaking milk. It was, you're sitting in an MR to do the PET scan, and I'm like crying, and so I had to stop nursing.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you. You're so smart, and are so intelligent about what you know and your experience, and what has impacted you, directly. However, there are a lot of people that have never heard these words before. So specifically encapsulated.
Okay.
So can you explain what that means?
Right. So encapsulated means that the tumor on my neck was contained.
Okay.
It was like in a little package. Right. So it was in a package.
Like
so
wrapped up in a bow.
Right.
Kind of
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So when they went in, they were able to just take out the whole thing without the fear of any cancer spreading to the rest of me. Right. So, so that was
a positive.
Yeah, right. So they biopsied it, right? They went and sent it for pathology and biopsied it, and then it came back that it was, in fact, Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I was stage what they call 2A, because it was above my diaphragm. And then they were just like, yeah, now you got to go for chemo and, the whole thing. So
they took out that, and then how does that impact the lump?
That's why I had to do chemo, right? Because they're like, we can't. That big tumor is tied into everything. It was, it's connected near your heart. It's in your lungs. It's like here, right? It was the lymph node. Right. We have lymph nodes through our entire midsection of our body. So these were the lymph nodes where like the tumor was created. And so, so that's when they said to me, well, you have a choice. You can do XYZ chemo. It was just like, that was all that was presented to me. Right. There was no, my mother-in-law who, was always into alternative medicine, which is sort of why I ended up even in the whole functional world. She took me to Mexico after I was done with this stuff. But, there was I was steeped in the conventional world. Right. And I had 3 children under the age of 4, and I'm looking at my mortality. And I remember saying to the doctor, like, am I going to live? And her answer was, I think so.
How old were you at the time?
I was 33.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah. And so, and then I go back home to my babies, and I'm freaking out a little bit. So, I was just like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do. I want to be around for my children. Like there was no option. I was going to be around for my children. And, and I think I was pretty fortunate. It's the kind of cancer that is pretty, is very survivable and is curable. So at least I had hope with that. But, when I was in Sloan Kettering and I walked in and there were young people there, there were older people there. And when I was getting treatment, there were some of them who didn't survive.
Right.
And so you're just like, okay, I remember the weeks where my blood counts were too low to get chemo. And, I was like, oh my God, I can't get chemo. What does that mean? And
Yeah, what does that mean?
it means, you got to wait. Your immune system is shot, right? You're basically ravaging your immune system when you get chemo. And so I had to get shots. My ex-husband had to give me shots of these, Neupogen, Epigen, they're called. There are all these things that help your blood counts come up because you need, but your white blood cell count is your immune system.
Right.
So when it's that low, so there was terrifying moments in all
I'm
of that. I mean,
sure.
I lost all my hair.
You have gorgeous hair.
Thank you.
Everybody, she has phenomenal hair.
And, I lost all of that. I think as a woman, I think that was the most defining moment for me.
Yeah.
When I had to shave my head. And I just remember looking in the mirror going, oh my God, I look exactly like my brother.
Wow.
And so, and I had wigs, I had beautiful wigs. And, but at the end of the day, you take off the wig and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're going, wow. So there's, a lot of moments there. I mean, my first chemo treatment, I remember I had my aunt there and my dad there, and the tears are just rolling down my face because here, this is poison going into you.
Yeah. Which is so contrary to.
Exactly.
I mean, especially what your purpose and your passion is for life.
Right.
As
well,
well
and that's what
as
it grew
how
out
you were
of.
raised. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. I don't know that I was I knew I didn't want to have the poison in me, but
Right.
not to the degree that I know. Now I know what I know now.
Yeah. Well, I find it very interesting. I'll speak for myself. Like, you think you're a somewhat intelligent, intellectual person. I look at how I was raised and, my formative years. And I'm so grateful that I grew up in the house that I grew up in. And, learn lessons, not every second of the day, but, I have enough wisdom and a tremendously strong foundation. And kind of know how to, navigate the waters based on what I do and how I feel and want to live my life. And, when this happened to it, I would say such a young age with children, like for me, my kids were babies and they couldn't take care of themselves. So I had to take care of them, being the mother, being the primary, person in their life. And unfortunately, I feel like, I always felt like, well, where am I on the list here? And, it's so easy to say, well, you come first and, put your oxygen mask on
Right.
and all those things. And I believe that to be true. However, the flip side is you kind of can't really do that if you're not well.
Right.
So how do you do that? So how was that experience for you as a mother when you were going through this process? You needed to take care of yourself, but then you also had to take care of your babies.
Yeah. I will say I was so lucky.
Yeah.
That my family rallied around. I mean, I have the most incredible family. Really. There's just, and friends. Like every week I'd have a different friend who would come and take me to chemo. Or a family member. But my mom was around. She was at my house almost all the time. We were fortunate enough to have help. Like I had someone we were able to hire a nurse at night to feed the baby, to feed Ashley because I couldn't do it anymore. So I was really, really very, very, very blessed and fortunate that we had family. We had the means to be able to get, have the help. And,
right.
But it was still, you just wish you didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're just like, oh, but that foggy feeling and it's just a terrible, terrible feeling. Yeah.
When you felt better and, you felt like you had gotten through the worst and you can't take a big circle and drive around it. You do have to live through your struggles and your challenges. So what was it like for you after the trauma and after the shock of the diagnosis when you felt you were in the clear, kind of, sort of? And then how did that drive and motivate you to start your business?
So I think I didn't, I mean, I don't know that I felt any, I finally got, so I had 12 weeks every week of chemo. So that was 3 months. And then I was finally given the clear on actually February 14th is my, like, we call it
I'm a date girl too. They're very important dates.
Yeah. So, and then I had radiation. And I think after the radiation, when I knew that I was clear, I was like, but what was happening is I was getting sick every 4 weeks or every whatever it was, like at least once a month, if not more. And I couldn't, it was just, I was like, this is not what I signed up for, right? This is not who I am. I'm usually full of energy and I was having a hard time taking care of the kids, right? I was like, oh, here I am done with treatment, but I'm still feeling like crap. And I just remember walking around Target trying to shop one day and I'm like, I was in such a fog. I'm like, I had to leave. I couldn't even function enough to shop.
Wow.
Like do a regular, I'm not talking about fancy, like you're going clothes shopping. It was just to do my regular, right. And that was a real wake up call. And that's when I said to my mother-in-law, who I used to tease all the time because she was into alternative integrated stuff.
Yeah.
20 before it was cool to be in it.
Yes, I know a few people like that.
Yeah, right. So I finally said to her, all right, like, where do you go? I knew she went to this place in Mexico. I'm like, all right. And I was very hesitant to leave my kids. Like I was that mom who just never left their kids, right? I mean, I would have people babysit, but like I was not going on vacations because I never wanted to leave anybody with the kids. I was that much of a control freak. But
well, I think as a side note, I think it's turned out very well. I mean, your children are
yes, no, I'm
amazing.
Super, super proud of them.
Yeah.
But so she took me down to Mexico and we, everybody assured me the kids would be fine, everything would be fine. And I went down there and that's really where my entire transformation happened. I met these doctors and it was in Tijuana. It wasn't exactly in the, beautiful Riviera of Mexico. Yeah. But
did she prep you or say, Meryl, I just want to let you know?
No, I mean, a
just
little bit. I kind of knew.
Just taking you along
I
for
just
the ride.
didn't even care where we were going. We could have been in F nowhere and I would have been fine, right?
Yep.
I was like, I need to get solutions and answers and feel better and I didn't care. So, we walk in and I'll never forget in the morning, the one of the nurses comes in with this big bag of what looked like coffee, but I'm like, that's not how I usually take my coffee. And she looked at me, she's like, no, you're not drinking this coffee. I'm like, what? So it was a coffee enema. So I was like, oh, wow. I had no idea, So
and that was the first thing? Was that your first?
That was like my first
experience.
Yeah, welcome to Tijuana, because we got in late at night. So it was like, and I remember just walking into the hospital and it was a very sterile sort of setting. It wasn't, or clinic, right? It was a very sterile looking clinic. Like it looked sort of like a hospital. And I was like a little bit like freaked out, like, oh, what am I doing here? Did I do the right thing?
Right, because you were just at
because I was
Kettering,
just at a hospital, right? So it was like, so the next day, that's when they walked in with so we went to sleep, right? And so I had my own room and whatever. And that's when she walked in and the whole goal of the enema is they want you to hold it for a certain period of time. Like they put it in and you're supposed to hold it. I'm like, I can't
like minutes,
hold
we're talking
like,
an hour.
Yeah, she's like, hold it for as long as you can. I think I made it for like 10 seconds.
And was that normal? Were people
that's just
like
what they did there, right? So, but then what happened was then they take you up to the room. They sort of show you around, whatever, and they hook you up to these IVs. So I was getting IV vitamin therapy, and everybody. There was, I don't know, maybe a dozen people there, and they were all watching Jerry Springer with their poles and the IVs. And here I am, me, like the inquisitive one. Where's the doctor? I want to know what this is, and what am I getting in me, and what. And I would just literally follow these doctors around with my little IV pole, and what is this, and ask them to explain what was going on, because that science person in me, like the researcher in me, first of all, I wanted to know what was going on. And second of all, I was just fascinated.
Yep.
And so these doctors, these oncologists were brilliant, and they were doing this work and that was, it's as funny as it is to say, that was the first time I was actually exposed to like a real whole food diet in the way that it was meant to be, more vegan and it was literally food is medicine there. And so I would sit with the chef and the people there in the dining room and understand what they did and what are these recipes. And so it was the most eye-opening experience to that point of like, wow, this is food is medicine. This is what natural is. This is what integrative is, and how to heal the body in the most natural of ways. And when I left there, I had a vaccine that was made out of my own immune system.
Wow.
It's called an autologous dendritic cell vaccine. And again, this is
Uh,
20 years ago. Like this is
like,
way ahead of.
how do they do that? Do you know
They literally draw your blood, they spin it down, they take like whatever white cells. I don't know. I mean, it's like a whole scientific thing,
Right.
right? But they basically, it's your immune system that you're putting, and they, whatever they do, and they put it
That's
back
so
in
cool.
to help you revitalize your immune system. So I was doing that when I got home, and I was doing the shots, and I was doing Laetrile, which is basically apricot seed, and I was doing all of these things, and I started feeling better. And then I started changing my diet, and I would suddenly start feeling better and start feeling better, and I was able to take care of the kids, and I was able to exercise the way I wanted and do all these things, and it was like life changing.
Hmm.
And so that's when I said, okay, why don't we know about this here? And what is all of this? And I need to throw myself into this work. And that was the beginning.
And this was, when
And
did this happen?
that was by 2001, 2002. By 2001, I basically said to my husband, and mind you, my entire support system, my entire family was in New Jersey. And I looked at him and I said, I cannot stay here. I am freezing. The cold is going through my bones. I am miserable because I'm pretty sure I had that whole seasonal affective disorder thing go on.
Right.
You know, as soon as we turned the clocks, I was like, I wasn't depressed, but I hated it, hated it. And so he's like, okay, whatever you want to do, I'll do. So I said, well, why don't we, because his family is in Florida. He says, well, I said, well, what about moving to Florida? And he's like, great. You know, but he had a really thriving podiatry practice up in Jersey. He was like, okay, no, we'll do whatever. And that was the decision, and, you know, broke my mother's heart. I think that is my biggest regret to this day, is how I told my mother and that response, but it really did break her heart. But, you know, cause I had 3 of her grandchildren.
Yeah. Did she
So
obviously have an understanding?
I think a little bit, but I think it
why?
was, no, she understood.
Yeah.
I just think it was, you know, it was just devastating for her. But it was ultimately the best decision I think I've ever made in my life.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thrived here, you know, the sun, the warmth. And then when we moved about a little bit more, I delved into a business that was actually a food business. It was a food delivery business, healthy food. It was probably 15, 20 years before its time.
Wow.
But
You're
then
a
after
real
that,
trailblazer, I
yeah,
have to say.
you know, it wasn't exactly
You
the smartest thing to do, but
Yeah.
but I was passionate about trying to bring healthy food to people, right? And so maybe didn't have the best business plan, but whatever, you know, you learn from your mistakes,
That's
right?
Live and learn.
And it was a costly one, but it was definitely a learning lesson. And then I decided to open my own practice, and had a great mentor who was doing this kind of work in Miami, and practiced under her for a little while. And just literally, when I tell you, I went to every conference I could get my hands on. And back then, so for anybody who knows Jeff Bland, like, he is the father of functional medicine. And I remember going to a conference in Miami. No, sorry, it was in Orlando. And being in his presence, watching the conference. And this was very early on. It was probably 2004. Thinking, and there was like 40, 50 people in the room. And I'm thinking,
Oh my gosh.
is this going to catch on? Right? Is this a thing? Like, this functional medicine thing? Is it a thing? And here we are, you know, 20 something years later, and you go to a conference and there's 20,000 people there.
Yeah.
Right. And functional medicine is a thing. So it's pretty incredible. Like, I was literally, and so when people say, well, are you certified? Do you do that? I'm like, I literally grew up with functional medicine. Like, I literally was the one who was doing the coursework before there was coursework.
Right. Did you feel like you had to get additional education once you started? You opened up your business, and you were creating a name for yourself. Did you find that that was a necessary part of you becoming a successful
100%.
practitioner?
100%.
And what did you do about that? Did you take the time to go to get additional certifications, like in nutrition or wellness or anything?
So at the time there was nothing like that. There was no certifications. That's what I'm saying. Like, it was really like finding lectures, finding these one-off things, getting educated from the companies that were doing the testing, getting educated from reaching out to these doctors, you know, just networking. So the woman that I worked with, Andrea Larson, who was in Miami, knew an acupuncturist, and I would go to the acupuncturist and learn from him, and knew someone else who was doing this, and I would go get more information and then try and find as much as you can, because again, it was so early on
Hmm.
that it's like, what do you mean gut health, right? We didn't know about gut health stuff.
No.
And we didn't know much about inflammation,
Right.
and we didn't know much about brain health. Like, it was, and even the cardiovascular stuff, right? So it was literally, you're kind of trying to figure out how to put these pieces together.
Mhm.
And so I would go to conferences and I'd go to lectures. And if there was a certification to be had at that time, I would do it.
Right.
Now I've got them all. Now I
Yeah.
have an immunology certification, and I've got a gut and metabolic certification, and I've got my functional medicine certification, even though I didn't necessarily need all of that right
Yeah.
now, but people want to see that, right? But I had I could be teaching these classes.
Yeah. No,
I've had people
I would
say to
take
me,
any class that you taught. I have I do have a specific question going back to your mother-in-law. It because it seems like contrary. Like your mother-in-law was a trailblazer
Oh
in
yeah.
that functional world, and she lived it at a time, obviously, before anybody even knew
Mhm.
what functional medicine was. So, and it seems contradictory that once you started your journey from a business perspective, an educational perspective, that you were like, well, where's all the information?
Mhm.
So, how do you think that your mother in law learned everything and, you know, took the time to learn about all the different things that she knew as it related to functional medicine? And then 20 plus years later, you're going to these
Mhm.
sessions to hear people actually talk about it.
Right. Well, so she didn't really I think for her it was more just like a fun thing to dabble in. Like people were saying, and I wonder, and I never really asked her, I probably should have asked her, like, where did her impetus for that come from? Right.
Right.
And I think she saw people in her family die of cancer and whatever. So there was some of that because she had no training, right? She didn't go
Right.
to college. There was none of this came out of a need to understand what is, and it was really more alternative and integrative. It wasn't
Hmm.
even called functional. And everybody made fun of her. Like, what is the voodoo? And
I'm
myself
sure.
included, I'd
Yeah.
look at her, I'm like, these supplements, I mean, she would come in with a bag full of supplements.
Yeah.
And I was taught in school, you don't need supplements, right?
Yes.
And I would literally call it voodoo. And that's when I finally said to her, I'm like, all right, I'm like with my tail between my legs, like, what is it that you're doing? Because clearly it's working, right?
Mhm.
Or clearly there's something to it. So there was some intuitive sense in my head, like she knew what she was doing and the rest of us were
Yeah.
not, And and I think for her it was just out of the desire to just want to be healthy. And she was listening to the gurus at the time,
Mhm.
right? Of this, just do this and do this. Like if someone said to her, do this and this and this, she would do this and this and this. And she didn't really want to understand why.
Right.
Right. That was me. I needed to know why. I needed to know, what am I taking this for? What is it
Mhm.
doing? I asked all the questions. Um, and to this day now she comes to me and says, well, should I do this? And she just will take the supplement, and she doesn't always do everything else that she needs to from a lifestyle perspective, But so for her, it wasn't the same journey,
Oh, yeah. It was like, all right, I'm just going to do this.
right.
I kind of don't care why or
Yeah.
all the who, what, where, when,
Right.
whys.
If it works, I'm in.
Right. I would say that, and I'm sure you would agree that growing up, and a lot of people that are my age or younger or whatever, or my parents, my grandparents, like there was this conventional or American diet, or,
Mhm.
you would see these graphs, and it is it's so unbelievable.
Wow.
So many things that we were looking at as graphs, as nutritional, as really important to our body,
Mhm.
our cells, all of that. A majority of them are horrible for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, really,
Mhm.
it's it's outstanding. I mean, it's so strange to me that that's how we grew up. I will say something. My dad was a huge fan of eggs. So uh, they probably weren't the pasture raised
Mhm.
eggs way back when, but at least he made eggs every night. However, they had salami in them, but they were
Right.
cooked in real butter. So there was some like minute level of awareness.
Mhm.
But it was more, I think, satiating or trying to satiate your body
Right.
and fill your body with stuff, and like the hell with what's in it
Right.
from a nutritional perspective. So when you started your business, Was it challenging for you to make a name for yourself, um, wanting to reach individuals to help them with their health and wellness journey? Did that take a long time from when you moved here, you started grabbing all the
Hmm.
information, starting your business? Um, what was, your first step in getting your first client?
Well, I always say, my business has grown organically as my children started to grow, right?
Hmm.
I mean, my first priority was always them, right? It
Right.
was always being a mom. But so I think once I started, like I said, I had this mentor, I worked with her. And then when I started my own practice, it literally started organically with friends who wanted to get better, who wanted to feel well. And it started sort of in the whole weight loss mentality as
Hmm.
well, right? Because people just always want to lose weight. And
Right.
when you're a nutritionist, that's sort of what they gravitate for.
Right.
And I think and I always say this, I mean, I think if you really want to call yourself an expert in something, then you have to be willing to change your views and move with where information takes you and research and just the trends. Trends, I mean, research trends, not
Right.
just, right? And so I think it grew organically. So I don't feel like it was so hard. I mean,
Hmm.
it's hard. Yeah, it's hard being an entrepreneur and it's hard running your own business.
Yeah.
And
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 taking
I
care of your family.
yeah, and I don't think I knew as much in business. I was definitely more that person who was just like, "Oh, you want to pay me later? Go ahead."
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
my business acumen wasn't. I mean, I needed to really learn how to run a big girl
Hmm.
business, as I say, right? And that took a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so, um, and my business really just grew by word of mouth. And I think I was always happy with the direction it was going in, only because I really wanted to make sure that I was with my kids and I had the luxury of not having to earn an income right
Yep.
away because my husband was supporting me, right?
Hmm.
So I had the best of both worlds in that. And I will tell you, I think now it's more challenging running a business than it was back then.
And
I think
why do you
I
think that is?
because there's so much in this arena now with social media and
Hmm.
people calling themselves experts who are not
Yes.
experts, and
Right.
people rattling off studies that you didn't really read the study, you didn't really go through the study, and it's happening, and there's just so much. There's so much polarizing information.
Yes.
Eat eggs, don't eat eggs. Have protein, don't have protein. Do this, don't do that. Do that,
Yeah.
and then people are coming to you like, what do I do, right? And now with the whole GLP-1 thing,
Hmm.
all these semiglutides and all the trizepatides, like all these medications, it's the oh, that's going to be the panacea, and
Right.
it's not, right? So I feel
Yeah.
like and our attention span is so limited, and people, like you said, like, people don't want to work that hard.
Yeah.
If you say you need to change your diet, we're in this fast-paced society
Hmm.
of just give me the quick fix. What do you mean I have to cook? What do you mean I have to get into the kitchen?
Right.
And so I think there's just so many nuances to now what you need to pay attention to and what people are willing to do, able to do without the excuses and the noise of what food is. I mean, we're seeing it go on, with the confirmation here.
Yep.
Is this good? Is that not good? What food is it? And I think the problem is we aren't told the truth about what's in our food.
All right.
And, that whole thing about really, where did the food pyramid come from?
Hmm.
It came from it came from, it really was grown out of politics,
Right.
right? The
It wasn't
dairy farmers who were lobbying for the vote of, oh wait, push more milk. The cattle farmers who are,
Hmm.
the corn farmers. It didn't come out of those weren't derived out of a necessity of nutrition.
Right. Oh, I
And
agree.
so this is why I think we're dealing with so much of that. What do I eat?
Hmm.
Because we're being fed the wrong information, literally, right? The
Yeah.
propaganda out there from these companies that have vested interests in their product.
Yeah. Um, I completely agree with that. It really is upside down. The
Yeah.
pyramid is
Yes.
upside down, and it's pushing something that is not true. And to say, well, this will help you live a
Right.
long and healthy,
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw it in my own family with my dad. I mean, he had his first heart attack when he was 48, congestive heart failure. He flatlined at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
He lived for 31 years with it. We had a custom made soda fountain, and he never met a chocolate chip ice cream soda that he would ever turn away. And he was so specific when we would go and get one, he wanted 5 full pumps of the chocolate. And he sometimes would go around the counter.
Oh, wow.
There was this great place in our hometown of Wilmette called Homer's Ice Cream, and was great. You know, it was a multi-generational business. And he would literally walk around, and he knew everybody there because he was regular. And be like, no, this is what I mean. Like, you have to make sure it comes all the way up before you start to press it down. So, you know, even him living for 31 years and having multiple surgeries and, you know, whatnot. You know, I think one of his second heart attacks in Maui was he was at the grocery store after his girlfriend got on a plane and went back to Chicago. And he went straight to the grocery store, to the bakery counter, and said to the guy, that piece of cake is for me.
Wow.
It was like chocolate, whatever.
Yeah.
And before he even wrapped it up, my dad was on the ground, full cardiac arrest.
Wow.
And the guy behind the counter saved his life.
Wow.
And when my dad got to the hospital, he's like, where's my piece of cake?
Oh, my gosh.
So, you know, he just wanted what he wanted, and he wanted it. And it took a long time for him to, you know, to himself. You know, obviously I wasn't the one, but my brothers were like, you know, what are you doing? Would take food away from him and everything like that. But there was a point of, you know, kind of in the grayish enlightenment for him. And he would rather joke and say, I'm going to write a book called No Fish or Fowl Before 40, because everything after that is horrible. And that's how I was raised, but I definitely was very aware that the food that he was putting in his body probably weren't the best choices, you know. And I remember it was very heavy when I was growing up, you know, wanted what I wanted because I wanted it. And I would be sitting on the top of the soda fountain with my spoon just digging, and we had the ice cream delivered to our house, you know, those big 3-gallon things. Digging. I'm like, oh, what's the point of putting it in a bowl? I'm just going to keep digging. So my mom would come home, and she saw me, and she's like, do you want celery, carrots, and French onion dip? I mean, meantime, I should have gone without the French onion dip because it was probably horrible for you. But the celery and carrots, I think, helped to pretend to balance out the nutritional value. So as I got older, I definitely started really changing what I was putting in my body. And I don't know if I ever really felt, you know, you and I have talked about this before, felt like, oh my God, I'm like a new person. But I felt like I definitely felt better, you know, and being an inquisitive shopper and making better choices and reading the labels. And, you know, I think that since I've been down here, I'm acutely more aware of what I'm putting in my body. And except for the suja, the drink that's sitting to the left of me. So can we talk about a typical initial session with your clients? Like you can use, you know, maybe my connection and my desire to come in and say, okay, I'm willing to learn.
Right. So I think, you know, that what you just said is the most important part is that you need to come in ready, willing, and able to make a change for yourself. Because it doesn't matter what I tell you about your health, right? Whether we do the testing, you have to be willing to say, okay, I am able and ready to make a change and understand that it's a process, right? So an initial consultation is an hour and a half long of us getting to know you and really understanding the timeline. I think that's so important. When you're looking at functional medicine, it is about root cause, right? So you're looking at things that happened in your childhood. And I'm not talking just physical things, right? Not just sicknesses and illnesses, mental, emotional things. And that's sometimes the biggest piece that we have to get through, right? The trauma or mental, emotional addictions, right? The addiction to the ice cream, right? It's a real addiction. And so understanding the nuances of who is that person in front of you, who is the human, and it's not just the food. It is understanding, as I always say, the pillars of health. We look at the nutrition. We look at the fitness, how you move your body. It's not even just fitness. It's just how do you move your body? Do you move your body? We look at sleep, we look at stress, we look at mental, emotional, and we look at environmental. And those are the things that we're assessing in our conversation with you to really get an understanding of who are you, what are your goals, what is your vision for your health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talk about longevity, and I feel like right now longevity is such an interesting word because people think they can biohack their way
Right.
out of this foundational stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you don't have the foundational stuff, it doesn't matter what you try and biohack. You can cold plunge, you can sauna,
Right.
you can do whatever you want. It's still not going to replace the things that we have to have foundationally, right? So those are the things that we talk about, and those are the things that we're going to evaluate. And you know, do we get and then do the testing and not everybody has to have testing, but it certainly gives us a better understanding. I say if you've got something under the hood, if we're looking at a root cause of some kind of imbalance, then we got to look at your biochemistry. We got to look at what are the systems that make your body tick. And I think what people really need to understand is that in conventional medicine, you're looking at separate pieces of your whole, right? You go to the cardiologist, you go to the endocrinologist, you go to the neurologist, you go to this ologist, gastroenterologist, and they're all looking at separate pieces, but your body is a whole being.
Right.
And you can't just disassociate your gut from your brain. You can't just disassociate your cardiac from your brain. And so all of these things are intertwined and interconnected. And if nobody's really looking at that puzzle and how to put those pieces together in the right way and deliberately and intentionally, then we're missing a huge component of health.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I will use myself as the example as being, sitting at your table. The initial consultation it wasn't overwhelming. It was fascinating, intriguing. I definitely knew that I was with a smart cookie that knew her stuff. So I knew I was in the right place. I wasn't cynical. I wasn't like, oh, what does she know?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And you can't negate the information that you provide to your clients in the initial consultation. And the next step for me was the testing,
Right.
which I really feel is critical because I think the time between the consultation, doing the testing, agreeing to it, and wanting to find out who you are as a person, and then getting the results, for some people would say, I got the consultation and I heard what she had to say. But you know what? I'm going to just stick with my Atkins diet or my whatever, the diet of the time. And as you said, believes that it is, well, if Susie does the Atkins and I do the Atkins, I'm going to see the results just like her. However, I know that science doesn't lie. And it is true. You can't negate the results of your own body and your own blood and your own whatever else you did with all the tests. That is undeniable.
Right.
So the answer of, well, what should I be eating isn't Susie's answer for what you should be eating. And, it does take time. The biggest shock for me was it wasn't so much the no gluten, no dairy, because I had eaten gluten. I wasn't a pasta girl. But the biggest shock for me really were the no eggs. I was like devastated, shocked, and befuddled. And then I came to acceptance, like, okay, no more eggs for me. So, somebody would say, no eggs. How is that possible? They're supposed to be good for you. And even now, the pasture-raised eggs. Can you explain eggs specifically, where people have a presumption that it's a nutritionally dense and satiating food to put in their body?
Right.
But on the flip side, for me, it's not.
Right. Well, I think, so wait, let me clarify something. Are we going off of the most recent stuff that you were doing with the whole medical medium thing? Is that what we're talking about? Or what? Or
no, for you. So when I got my results.
Right. Well, when we said no eggs.
Yes.
But did we do the food sensitivity test?
Yeah.
Right. That
Everything.
was from that. Right. Okay. So So when we did your testing, right, this is why I always say it's always about personalized nutritional medicine, right? It has to be understanding, what is my body reacting to? Why is it reacting? What's going on with my immune system? It always comes back to what's going on with the immune system. And so when we do the sensitivity testing, we're saying what in the body is responding to this food substance, and why, and we need to remove it so it stops this immune response, right? This attack, if you will. And oftentimes when we do food sensitivity testing, it's a result of there's some imbalance in the gut. When you fix that imbalance, sometimes the sensitivity goes away, right? But so for you, it was more about there was something in the egg that was triggering your immune system, like, this is dangerous, this is dangerous, this is dangerous, right? It's not always like that. Again, you can't apply what's going on for you to someone else because we don't know what's going on in their body. Yeah, and one of the things we happen to know now is eggs are pretty, they've sort of been genetically modified to a point where they can feed viruses in the body. They trigger that because viruses like Epstein-Barr and things like that were actually fed egg as their food. So when you have a virus in your body now, that egg feeds the virus, the viral growth, right? And so there's nuances to this.
Yeah.
But we know that because food has been, it's the same thing with gluten, right? Many, many years ago, gluten was never an issue because before the wheat grain was hybridized and genetically modified, our grandparents never had a problem with it. You go out in the field, you mill it, and you have bread. Great.
Right.
Now it's not even the same wheat grain. So what we know is the wheat grain prior to what we call the food industrialized revolution, right? The wheat grain contained about 6% gluten. Now the wheat grain has close to 14, 15, 16% gluten in some cases. So there's not really a digestive system on the planet that can tolerate that.
Right.
So it's really about what has happened to our food that has made it indigestible, unusable, and a problem and dangerous for our bodies.
I'd love to, if you can explain a couple of things, and I don't want to forget to bring them up. Number one, I see that what you think is healthy, if you turn over the package, let's say you go to Whole Foods, and it'll tell you it's genetically modified, which I think is, like evil in a way.
It's totally evil.
And I've been much more enlightened, I don't know, over the past 3 to 5 years, and aware and listening and hearing and reading about, unfortunately, the danger in our food system and the dyes and healthy eating. And, when I was going through this, I'm like, what do they serve in hospitals? Crap. What do they serve in our schools? Crap. The worst foods you could possibly imagine. I was surprised every time my dad was in the hospital that he wasn't going to flatline again because the food was horrific. And he was trying to recover from congestive heart failure. Like, it didn't make any sense whatsoever. So that is something that I've definitely seen change, and not in a good way, in our food system, which is why I read everything. I want to buy whole foods. I follow a couple people that are into healthy eating and give you alternatives for crackers or whatever. So you really have to, again, continue to make a choice on what you're buying and what you're making and how you're making it.
Yes.
The second thing I wanted to ask you that you had mentioned with about all the rise in the GLP-1s and, the quick fix. So that's been around for a long time. People have gotten tummy tucks, plastic surgery, barometric, all the procedures to help either solve the problem right there or do a one-stop shop kind of thing. Like, I need like a boost.
Right.
And the other thing is, I've noticed since I moved to Florida, there are all of these wellness centers so that you can go in and get, an infusion.
An IV. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even though I know people that are in the business, that are running, multiple locations of that business, I shy away from that because I just need to pick up real food.
Right.
Right. And it actually kind of scares me. I'm going for this shot or I'm going for this infusion because that putting those types of things in your body doesn't seem natural to me.
Right.
So I know that was two very long-winded things that I'd like you to talk about, but can you talk about that and your opinions and where we're headed?
So I think the food part was the first one, right? I mean, I think we have to be our own best advocates. We have to be educated. No longer can we just kind of go down a supermarket aisle and not question what's in the food.
Right.
And half the time now, they don't even need to put what's in the food, right? There's so many things that there's stories about that. But so I think we have to be our own best advocate and really understand at the end of the day, we've got to put real food into our bodies. Yeah. And shop the perimeter. The moral of the story is shop the perimeter of the supermarket, read every label. And I always say, if you cannot pronounce an ingredient, your body doesn't know what to do with it.
Right, exactly.
And what we know about, again, most of the foods in a package have been highly processed and are modified in some way and have chemicals in them in some form or fashion that your body doesn't know what to do with and are not. I always say when we create a plan for someone, it has to be nutritionally supportive. So pick up that food and say, what is this actually doing for my health and for my body? And if you can't answer that, then put it back. Right. And again, what we know about the seed oils, right? All of the canola oil and the sunflower oil and the safflower oil and the soybean oils, like how heavily processed. Like if you actually watched a video on how oils are manufactured, you'd probably throw up.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking because they get stripped. You take the actual kernel of whatever you're using, they strip it, they bleach it, they put formaldehyde in it, they put all these chemicals, and then they have to add perfume to it so it doesn't smell like it's rancid.
Right.
I mean, this is a problem.
Yeah.
So, you pick up the salad dressing, you pick up the crackers, you pick up the bread, you pick all of them that have these processed oils, which is just about everything. Is you need to watch out for. And then if you're using corn, well, corn is genetically modified, right? And even if it's not genetically modified, most of those crops are
sprayed.
Yeah, sprayed or something, right? I mean, so then people, and I don't want to be the negative Nelly here, like you can't eat anything, but it's sort of, we've gotten to that until we start waking up to the fact that there's a really good movie out. It's been around for a while. It's called Kiss the Ground. And if you haven't watched it, you should go watch it because it's kind of scary. Like if we don't start taking care of our farmland and our farmers and the really good farmers, not the conventional farmers who are pushing the GMOs. They say we have like 60 harvests left before our farmland is completely unusable. Like, I don't know about you, but that's terrifying to me. They have another movie coming out called Common Ground and all about that as well, right? The whole regenerative farming movement. So I feel like as a society, as a culture, we have got to start to pay attention to this because it will be at the risk of our own demise. Like, and I'm not trying to be fatalistic or anything, but that's the reality, right? We are just poisoning our environment and our food to the point where, and I've joked about this, and I actually heard someone say this, if you've seen the movie WALL-E, did you ever see that? It was an old animated film. Not old, it's at least 20 years old. It was a Disney film. It was animated, but it's all about how we've killed our planet, and there's this one machine that's around that's trying to sort of save humanity. But it shows humanity like just going in this conveyor belt of just food, right? We just go and eat on this conveyor belt, and you just look at what's going on. I mean, most of the population in the next 5 years is going to be obese.
Yeah.
How do we look at that and say, as a society, as a culture, as a government, that's okay?
Oh, I know.
And we don't need to get into the politics because that's a whole other, I could really spend time on that. But so I think that's the first part, is that we just have to be aware. And I think we have to make some noise. We have to demand better food.
Yep.
Right? Because at the end of the day, if you look at these companies that are putting out food, it's all about making money.
Right.
They are not interested in your health.
Right. And it's not food.
And it's not food, right? So they're putting out chemicals and garbage that they want us addicted to.
Right. because I, again, not to get political, but it is true. They provide they something, then they provide the solution by medication. They create the
right.
problem.
They create the problem.
I'm
They
sorry.
create the disease.
Correct. And then they say, oh, here are the pills.
Right, because big pharma, big
right.
food are in bed together.
Yeah.
And so just take this and it's the same thing in the medical world. So,
Yeah.
right. So we've got that. And as a society, we need to demand, and we need to demand that it's reasonable. Like I can't tell you, you go to the store, forget about Whole Foods. I literally got 3 bags of real food yesterday at Whole Foods. And it was almost $200. What?
Yeah.
Right? It was. Right. So, and that was at Whole Foods. I try and find other places, but even still, I went to a farm stand and it was like $4 for a head of romaine. I mean, I do try and grow my own stuff, but I don't have enough to grow. So we have to demand better, and thank God I can afford that, but most people can't.
No, that's true.
And, so I think we've got to really start to pay attention to that conversation, and we've got to wake people up. Like that's part of, even on my own podcast, I say I am really passionate about how do we really literally make America healthy? Like that has to be for front and center.
Yeah.
And politics aside, Americans need to be healthier. So I think that's, the first part of that. And to address your question about the GLP-1s, again, look at who's behind that.
Right.
Okay. It's pharmaceutically driven, and these they want us on these medications for life. And I can tell you, I can't even tell you how many people now I've seen in my practice who want to come off of these because they don't feel well. And yet their appetites are voracious after they come back. They inevitably gain. I will tell you unequivocally, there's no way anybody goes off of this and doesn't gain some weight back.
Right.
Substantial, right? Like though I have someone who just lost 30 pounds. She's already gained 10 pounds back because she just doesn't know what to do with herself. So unless you are actually exercising and moving your body in the right way, I'm not talking about going out and walking. You've got to develop muscle. And most women who are on these, men too, but mostly women, are not out there moving their bodies and moving their muscles in a way that actually creates muscle mass.
Right.
And now your metabolism is going to be shot. Like there's huge long-term issues with this, and even short-term. So I feel like for the people that really need it, I've done podcasts on this. I am fully committed to supporting people who need it because yes, there are people who need it and benefit. But unless you know how to come off of it the right way and are educated on how to do that, and for your own body know how to do that, it's a nightmare. So we are on this roller coaster that these pharmaceutical companies are creating to the tune of trillions of dollars.
Yep.
We're not even in the billions. Now we're in trillions. And now they want everybody on these.
Yeah. And I believe
there's an agenda.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I believe it's all on purpose. The final question I wanted to ask you, I know that there are farms, people want to, including myself, want to get like pasture-raised chicken who want to buy meats, but are suspicious of what's in the stores. What are your thoughts about finding real, safe, organic, if that's necessary, farms to purchase those items from? And do you believe that is like the best answer to purchase those, satiating foods like the proteins versus going into Whole Foods or Publix or Trader Joe's? I
mean, I think it's, look, if we can do it sustainably and there are farmers out there doing it, I think the best thing for anybody that's listening is get to know your farmer. I almost feel like in order to save our species, we kind of got to rewind the clock to what when the milkman delivered the milk,
yes,
when the farmers actually gave you the chicken, you know what I mean? Because that's the only way to really ensure that you're holding people to the tenets of what are they, that they're producing good quality food, that they're feeding their chickens, that they're treating them the way they're supposed to be treated, and that there's integrity, right? So there's no integrity in the food supply right now. So I think it's important to befriend the farmer and reach out to the farmer who is doing organic and support local and sustainable when you can. I mean, again, there's Zach Bush and so many people out there who are really trying to get people to understand regenerative farming. And there's products on the shelf that say regenerative farming. And I keep saying I want to find all these people and put them together. Like there's farmers out there who are finally saying, okay, we've had enough. Our farmland and our cropland is going to waste, and we need to fix the soil. But it does go back to, not to digress too much, but yeah, you got to know, you got to reach out to the farmers and ask them what they're feeding their chickens. And there's a Harris Ranch. I mean, there's ranchers out there that you can speak to, that you can look at. I mean, I have the names, I don't have them off the top of my head, but there are people who are out there doing the good work. And I feel like we need more of that.
Okay. My final question to you is, how do we find these farmers? Is there a website? Is there a newsletter that people can start doing the research on their own for farms in their communities?
Yeah, I think you just got to start doing the research, right? There's a farmer. So I'm down in Plantation. There's Tree Amigos growers, right? They are farmers. I mean, this guy, Jason, who owns it and runs it, he's amazing. I literally take a picture of something. He answers me back like, this is what you need to do with your bok choy. And this is, and
I
so
love that.
knowledgeable.
I'm going to have to call him.
Yeah, he's so knowledgeable, right? So I talk to him, and then he's got people down there who own farms who, he recommends or whatever. There's an herbal guy right on the premises. You talk to him.
Oh my God, I'm going to take a day trip.
So, yeah, it's great. It's a great place. So I think places like that, right? There's Swank Family Farms up in Okeechobee, in West Palm, way up there. West, it's more north than West Palm, but and they have all these growers and people who farm, the mushroom farmers. And I think if you go to the farmers markets, Delray has a great farmers market on Saturday. There's some good, not all of them are organic. There's a couple of good vendors who have organic farms, and they are the ones who own Bednar's too.
Yes.
And
one of my
they
favorite
have,
places.
yeah. So again, you got to be particular. Not everything there is organic, but
Right.
you start reaching. And then there's a gentleman who does have pasture raised, like he literally takes the eggs from his farm and he sells them there. So I think those are the people, right?
But
that
I
you
still
need
can't
to,
eat them, right?
well, no, you cannot. But these are the people that you can speak to because
Yep.
they know the people who are doing the right thing and, raising their chickens well and safely and again with integrity and so forth. So
Meryl, you are so smart and you're gorgeous.
Thank
but
you.
And I'm so grateful that I know you.
Oh, well,
And I've
thank you.
learned a tremendous amount from you. Some of it I've liked, and some of it obviously I've been disappointed in hearing, especially as it relates to eggs. All right, everybody, we're done. This was a fantastic episode. And like I said in the beginning, mind your nest, mind your body, mind your health, mind your wellness. I hope everybody has a great day. And don't forget to mind your nest.